Kim Dorsey, Derrick Dorsey, Lance Kirkpatrick, and Joshua Ville. Things would turn out tragic for Kim Dorsey on October 28, 2012, in East Jacksonville, Florida. Kim would be found by her husband, Derrick Dorsey, after he worked a 24-hour shift as a firefighter. Derrick would call 911 after frantically trying to save his wife's life, but unfortunately, he was too late. Kim suffered from depression, but she had 2 dogs who she considered her kids, a college graduate who trained building inspectors. Found in her home, nude, lifeless, battered, and stabbed. Derrick would be one of police's main suspects, as the firefighter covered his wife's unclothed body before police arrived. A red flag for any suspect. But police thought Derrick should know not to contaminate the crime scene, as he was a first responder. But he did. Derrick will report that he initially thought his wife committed suicide. But as soon as police arrived on the scene, they knew Kim did not do this to herself. She fought for her life. A broken pool stick, bullet holes, zip ties, and Kim fatally stabbed. Derrick will report to police that he was actively having an affair on Kim, and that he's had several affairs, something that he wasn't proud of. But Derrick was cooperative with police, and the firefighter had an alibi, as he was at work for 24 hours. Police would take Derrick out of the center of attention, but they would keep in consideration that Derrick could possibly know the killer, and Derrick could possibly be working with the killer. Police would ask about other possible suspects, and Derrick would mention Lance Kirkpatrick. I gave him a job, he lived with us, but he would never, according to Derrick. Kirkpatrick was away at the time of the crime, and Derrick thought he adored Kim. He would take a bullet for her before he hurt her. And then there was 21-year-old Joshua Ville, whom Derrick also hired and housed, but he wouldn't get the same defense from Derrick as Lance. Police would bring Joshua Ville in for questioning. Not only did 21-year-old Josh have a drug problem, he missed his meeting with Derrick on the 28th. The morning Derrick discovered his wife, Derrick would arrange to pick the 21-year-old up after he'd gotten off work to allow him to do a work around he and Kim's home. Josh, now the prime suspect, his reason for not showing up that Sunday, he had a night of drinking. 2 nights actually, Friday and Saturday. Ville seemed infatuated with Kim, and that only made police focus in on him more. The 21-year-old had never had a sexual relationship with Kim Dorsey, but he made it very clear, had he ever been provided the opportunity to pursue the 38-year-old married woman, he would have. And then police dropped a bomb. Did you hear about what happened to her? A confused Josh. No, what happened? She's dead. And it was his reaction that gave officers reasons to believe that Josh didn't kill Kim, and had no reason to believe he even knew she was dead. The hurt in his eyes, the pain in his voice, the compassion he had for Kim. There was no way he could be responsible for this. The 21-year-old was devastated. Police would revisit the Dorsey's home before turning it back over to Derrick. They would ask questions, and he would point out the things that seemed out of place to him. Initially noticing remotes in the sink, police would ask Derrick how to turn the television on. As soon as Derrick turned on the TV, an adult movie came across the screen. Derrick responded, "That's not mine, and that's not my wife's. Whoever watched this did this to Kim." That would turn Derrick's attention to a man by the name of JR. JR had been by the couple's home to do work on their entertainment set the Friday before Kim's tragedy. When police spoke to JR, he would admit that he was at the couple's house that Friday evening. He would also admit that he's done work with Derrick before. Police would also take note that JR had scratches on his arms and the technician worked with zip ties. JR would quickly offer up his DNA to exclude himself as a possible suspect. It wasn't until police got a report of a stolen SUV that gave them the help they needed. Who stole that SUV? Lance Kirkpatrick. Lance was not on the shrimp boat Dorsey originally thought he was on during the time of Kim's murder. And although Derrick thought Lance would take a bullet for his wife, Kirkpatrick was back in the center of attention. Witnesses put a small SUV at the Dorsey's home, blue in color, the Saturday Kim was murdered. That SUV would match the description of the vehicle the woman reported Lance failed to return. Police would return to watch the gate footage recorded at the entrance to the couple's neighborhood. Investigators now have a prime suspect, Lance Kirkpatrick. In the search for Lance, police would talk to a friend of Lance, who was also at the party Lance stole the SUV from, Brian Kiefer. Brian claims he rode around all night looking for Lance because he felt partly responsible for Lance stealing the young lady's SUV. Lance did not return to the party with drugs that night, but Brian said he located Lance the next day. And what Brian reported next, police was not prepared for. He had an injury on his hand and looked disordered, unkempt. He told me he murdered somebody. Brian would tell the police Lance confessed to him, and he would go on to reveal details of the crime only the killer should know. Lance waited for the sixth shot. But it never came, Brian reported. Lance thought Kim was going out the window, so he jumped on her, punched her, stabbed her in the neck. But was Brian a friend of the killer, or was Brian the killer? Time to talk to Lance. Lance would put himself at the home on the Saturday Kim was murdered. Kirkpatrick put on a front. He, Kim, and Derrick had no problems. And although he was at the Dorsey's home, he was not inside. Investigation would reveal, using a spare key the Dorseys leave outside their house, he let himself in. Kirkpatrick would claim he and Kim had a sexual relationship. He did not rape her. What he did to Kim was only out of self-defense. Kim was angry because Lance had introduced Derrick to several of the women he was cheating on Kim with. Lance would claim he zip-tied Miss Dorsey in an effort to wait for police, but thought it didn't look good with the bullet holes, so he attempted to cut the zip ties off. That's when he and Kim struggled over the knife, and at some point during the struggle, he must have stabbed Kim without noticing it. I waited for the police. I was frantic, didn't know what to do, scared. I sat waiting for the police. They never came. After being found guilty, the defense team would garner sympathy for the defendant's drug use. Lance wasn't a violent killer, a rapist. He didn't deserve to die for this crime. When Kirkpatrick was not on drugs, he was a loving, caring son. He was a friend, and even his ex-wife would testify for Kirkpatrick's character. He would avoid the death penalty and receive 3 life sentences.